good day. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist here on 50. Actually today I am from the podcast layer with producer Philip. Little bit of a change up. Happy to be here. LA's insane. But I don't think that it is this grassroots movement that the mainstream media is making it out to be. There seems to be people paying for protesters. There seems to be truly chaos. Our governor has said, oh yeah, no, we don't need your help, and Trump, you're only making it worse. Well, let's see. The city was burning. Cop cars have been burned. I've seen multiple videos of these peaceful protesters throwing rocks from the tops of overpasses at cops. Watched some windows smash. They've shut down freeways. They've looted. They've burned. But it's a peaceful protest. Mostly peaceful, right? Isn't that how that goes? Kind of like BLM, buy large mansions. Those were all peaceful protests. Now we're back to the realm of peaceful protests. Was Trump right in sending people? Well, they did a survey recently, and 59% of the people said, yep, Trump was right to send the National Guard to Los Angeles. Clearly, the people taking this survey were not realizing that in the Democrats' world, peaceful includes violence. So as long as you redefine words, then yeah, it's peaceful. 39% said, no, Trump shouldn't have sent that. Well, I would guess those are part of the Trump deranged or the cultural Marxist. I don't know. Recently, Tom Homan was questioned. And he's like, well, would I take Gavin Newsom to jail? And he's like, well, that's up to Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. But you know what came out of that whole, when he answered that question? I watched several mainstream media outlets, and they said, oh yeah, Tom Homan threatens to arrest Gavin Newsom. Now, Tom Homan said, look, there should be consequences if you're breaking the law, if you look at his clip. But he didn't make the decision because he wasn't the Attorney General. In other words, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors here. I have friends that have gone. They've actually gone out to the protests. And they're telling me, look, you better be dressed up like you're a hardcore leftist, or you better have a bunch of security. California governor candidate Steve Hilton recently went. Now, he went with a bunch of armed security. But even then, you could see where there was all kinds of chaos going on. They had rocks, which, I don't know, when you throw a rock at somebody and it hits them, it's violence. Well, no, they said it's peaceful. It can't be violence if you hit somebody with a rock. Should there be consequences? I think there should. And Gavin's like, oh no, you need to just stay out. It's gone so far as Gavin Newsom has decided he needs to sue President Trump on whether he has the right to bring in the National Guard. Now, Title 10, last updated in about 2020, maybe it was 2018. That's a rule that has to do with what the president can do with the military. Now, in a world where everybody got along and we largely agreed, a governor would request the National Guard and the president then would say yes. Instead, what was happening was the chief of police of Los Angeles. I would think this man probably would understand whether or not his officers were, I don't know, let's use the word overwhelmed, because that's the word that the chief used during interviews multiple times. My officers are overwhelmed. And Mayor Karen Bass, mayor of LA, she did nothing. I think she probably needed another trip to Africa because she needed a break from all the criticism because people are realizing she's incompetent and they're actually calling her on it. So she's not having the easy path as a good little communist that she had before. And Gavin Newsom, well, let's see, it'd been several days. The police chief saying he's overwhelmed and nobody's calling it a state of emergency within California. Matter of fact, it went so far as Trump called Newsom and Newsom said, oh no, he never called. Trump called him twice. First time it didn't go through, Trump showed the call logs. And the second time it showed that he talked to little Lord Gavin Newsom, our governor, for 16 minutes. Now, I really thought that Gavin was pretty bright, but apparently his recall's not very good. And maybe he's been hanging out with Joe Biden and he just can't remember anything. Or it just could be that he was lying. Hard to say which. I mean, Gavin, which one is it? You never want to be accountable for anything. And now you say, no, Trump didn't reach out to you to try to fix the problem or talk about the problem of the riots in LA where they're burning their own communities. Now, again, at the beginning, I said, I don't think this is just grassroots. And it's important to me that the average legal immigrant has moved about 40 points towards Trump. If we were to look at 2016 and look at where they were at, how they viewed Trump, how they viewed immigration, and whether it was legal or not, even the people that came legally, they were still very much in support of just people coming here. We move forward now to 2025. And everything shifted. Trump is almost dead even with that group, that constituency of first generation, came the right way Americans who should be voters as opposed to illegals, illegal criminal aliens. And I'm purposely saying that way because if you look in our law, how it's written, they're not just illegal aliens. It is illegal criminal aliens because the very act of coming across the border is criminal. Now, it's only a misdemeanor. I think we need to fix that. Nonetheless, it is an illegal act. And the left wants to redefine that and go, well, and Gavin particularly, well, I'm here to protect the citizens of California. I'm here to protect the vulnerable. Did you protect the vulnerable? It's hard to take you seriously. Did you protect the vulnerable when you spent $24 billion with a B dollars on homelessness and we can't account for the money and we magically have more homelessness? What about the train to nowhere, Gavin? You're here to protect the little people? We've so far don't have even 1/2 mile of track. And we've wasted $30 billion, and they're projecting that the whole project's going to be approximately $130 billion. I can keep giving examples of Gavin not really wanting to be accountable and saying that he wants to protect us all. Oh, here's another huge one. California gives welfare to people that aren't here legally. California gives free medical care, Medicaid. No, excuse me, Medi-Cal. The California version is Medi-Cal. And because he's given so much of it to illegals, you now have to wait in line. Like a regular U.S. citizen. So the people who came legally, they've had enough. They've shifted towards Trump. I think the more we watch LA burn, as they protest, they burn American flags as they hang on to Mexican flags. And for me, this isn't a anti-Mexican thing. This is did you come the right way? We've even got a foreign president in Claudia Sheinbaum. She is the president of Mexico. She's basically a socialist. And she's said, well, everything should be peaceful. And before she finished that speech, she said, well, we should act. By we, she's calling foreign nationals of her country that are in this country illegally to act. The main thing she was upset about in that case was Congress had proposed a 3.5% tax on money sent back to Mexico from here. Now, illegals send back a few $billion every year back to Mexico. I'm not saying all illegals are from Mexico. A huge number are. But Congress has now proposed that, and she's having a fit about a 3.5% tax. I thought the congressman's response to that was, well, what about a 15% tax then? If you don't like this one, here we go. So there's all kinds of craziness. We're going to go with my first clip because I think it gives an idea of what is expected of a first-generation American.
The oath of allegiance, a sworn declaration recited by those seeking U.S. citizenship. It is the final step in becoming an American. Every new citizen says these words: I hereby declare on oath, and I absolutely and entirely renounce all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, state, or sovereignty, and that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. One oath, one country, no divided loyalties. But the governor of California, he must take an oath too, not just to Sacramento, but to Washington, not just to the state, but to the nation. He swears to support and defend both the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California, to bear true faith and allegiance, to faithfully discharge the duties of his office. This isn't a formality. It's a promise to the American people, to citizens, not to foreign powers, not to political agendas. So when a governor turns his back on that oath, when he prioritizes flag-waving protesters over law-abiding citizens, when he refuses to cooperate with federal law, the question isn't political, it's constitutional. Let's remind him of what he swore.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
Against all enemies.
Against all enemies.
Foreign and domestic.
Foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance.
To the Constitution of the United States.
To the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties upon which I am about to enter.
The duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, I don't give a damn, but I care about my community. I care about this community. The hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop, and we need to push back. And I'm sorry to be so clear. Get your hands off these poor people who are just trying to live their lives, man. Trying to live their life.
Huh. There we have Gavin, and he's not at all focused on protecting the citizens or their rights. And I feel bad for all the business owners in that area. I feel bad for all the people that have had their cars vandalized. Many of the videos, as you look around, there's graffiti now everywhere, and clearly very recent graffiti. Graffiti on cars. Look, you ruin a paint job in today's world? Why, that's more than $950. You ruin one of the glass windows for a business? That's more than $950. According to Prop 36 that we just passed, why, that'd be a felony. So Gavin doesn't want the National Guard there, even though the police chief of LA has said they're overwhelmed. Yet, when peaceful protests came to the Capitol during COVID, fortunately, I was there a couple times. I was never there when it went out of control. One of the times he had almost 1,000 between CHP and a little bit of National Guard. He called them out. And there were a few people that just wouldn't stay in the area that they wanted. So he arrested some people, but there was no rocks. There was no beating officers. There was just words. And that petty little punk, Gavin Newsom, decided that, no, I got to seem like a tough man, and we need the National Guard, and we need to crack down on these people protesting. So when you protest his tyranny, he's tough and he stands against you. When you're burning the American flag, when you're holding another flag like a postage stamp, telling you, oh, I need to be shipped to this place, some other flag besides the U.S. flag, he's okay with it. What does it say when he will allow violent protest unless you redefine violence, and everything's okay when it's the issue you like, and when it's the issue you don't like, then no, we can't have the National Guard there. I went to one protest in Sacramento during COVID that I counted over 500 officers. We only had about 1,000 people there. He wasn't worried about wasting money. He wasn't worried about intimidating us. Keep in mind, that's one armed officer for every 2 people. He didn't have a problem with that. He doesn't have a problem with a show of force and being a petty thug when it's an issue he doesn't like. Now, wondering if I'm saying that these are not just organic grassroots kind of bubbling up in response. I want to point out that, first of all, you need to understand some things about ICE. ICE can't really just show up somewhere and start collecting people. They need an immigration judge's court order, whether it's a deportation order or just a search warrant, but it has to come from a judge. ICE can't just act on its own. They don't just show up wherever they want. A judge has looked at it and said, yes. The reason they're currently in LA is to pick up criminals. And ICE has talked about what types of criminals. There's some counterfeiting, there's some drug runners that they wanted to pick up because Trump has focused on removing criminally illegal aliens that also are criminals. And I am so pleased to say that the Democratic Party has decided that they are defending criminals. They're defending non-U.S. citizens. And I would strongly encourage them to keep doing more of the same. I want to say thank you, because I think all it does by them being on the wrong side of the issue is help us. So if bricks are being dropped off by the pallet load, just like we saw during the BLM riots, bricks that could be used for nefarious purposes. We had a whole van load, and this is on camera. You can see a whole van load, and they're just unloading boxes of face shields. Now, why would you need face shields if you're protesters? I think because they're trying to stop rubber bullets if rubber bullets were needed, and maybe tear gas. But if it's just grassroots, how did a whole truckload of face shields show up? Well, as we look into this, and you can go to like Carl DeMaio, you can look at, so that's at the state level, at the assembly level. Carl DeMaio's talking about how we're funding through Act Blue, through Chirla, which is a basically left-wing organization that California funds. Or if we look at a particular, what is the guy's name? Neville Roy Singham, and we look at what Anna Paulina Luna is saying. She's a congresswoman out of Florida. So this tech CEO named Neville Roy Singham, he's now retired because he sold his big tech business for big money. So he's CEO that sold out. there's absolutely a connection, and he is funding the LA riots. Now, aside from some supplies, what would cost a lot of money if you were funding the LA riots? What would that be? Could it be that maybe we're not crazy in saying that they're paying protesters? Because I've watched a ton of man on the street interviews with leftist groups, and somebody comes up and says, well, hey, what do how are you guys getting paid? What's going on? And several of them now have said, oh yeah, I'm getting paid. I get paid this per day. Now, not specifically with the LA riots, but with previous protests. As you look, it is the same rainbow coalition that doesn't make sense that's protesting the LA riots, for instance. Does it make a lot of sense that there are gays for freeing Palestine? When if you were gay and you went to Palestine, you'd probably be thrown from the roof. And that's probably one of the nicer things that might happen to you. So Palestine doesn't support gays, but gays support Palestine? Doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, it doesn't have to with one of the arms of cultural Marxists. The woke doesn't make sense, or the idea that men and women are exactly the same, there's no differences, and as long as you declare you're one or the other, no matter which you are, whatever you declare, that's the new reality. Well, again, I think the left is on the wrong side on this issue. I think this is like a 80-20 issue. I think it might even be higher than that when you have men and women's sports. There was all this time to fight for equality, Title IX, and now because we can call a man or a woman anything they want by however they say they are. In other words, there's no actual there's nothing but subjective truth. There's no actual truth. It's all my truth. Your truth. Well, if it's always defined that way, then how do you have common sense? And I think that's the biggest thing that's missing from the modern Democratic Party. They care about power. They care about power. They care about you towing the line. They talk about all their diversity, but there's not much diversity of thought. It's all leftist. It's all big government. It's all government is the answer. Or maybe transgenderism is the answer, or maybe climate change is the answer. But those big things, those are things that you can't disagree. You can't say something different. A great example of you can't say something different. John Fetterman has been entirely reasonable about this. He's like, sure, people have the right to protest. It hurts their cause when they bring violence to it. And worse than that, it doesn't just hurt their cause, but once you have violence, you don't have the right to protest with violence. And John Fetterman has been like, look, what's going on in LA isn't okay, as opposed to AOC has held her finger to the wind, and the wind that seems to affect her the most is whatever the bosses at the top and the left are telling her. And she has just towed the line. But John Fetterman, who's a Democrat, and let's face it, a pretty left guy, but with some common sense, thank God there's a few Democrats with some common sense, not many, they're ostracizing him. Remember all that talk over the last few weeks about how Fetterman's not competent anymore? Because he dared agree with Trump on something, or he dared not toe the line and go with the orthodox opinion of, oh yes, Israel's nothing but evil, Palestine's nothing but good. Not that simple, folks. Israel, it's not perfect, but you could be a Muslim, an Arab born, and be an Israeli citizen, and have all the rights of another Israeli citizen, or you could be gay and be an Israeli citizen and have all the rights, because it is a liberal democracy. It is not a representative republic like us, so that means every government that's not a representative republic like us, it's flawed. That's okay. Now, there's, particularly from Gavin Newsom, there's a lot of talk of Trump doesn't have the right to deport people. Well, in 1996, Bill Clinton signed the Immigration Reform Act that states illegals could be deported without judicial hearings. Now, this was signed into law. Congress agreed. Sometimes my memory, it struggles, but I'm pretty darn sure that Bill Clinton, he was a Democrat. Wasn't he a Democrat?
No. Yeah, he was.
He was. Okay. I was just questioning myself. So a Democrat signed into law that illegals could be deported without an immigration hearing. And Barack Obama, he deported I think it was about 8 million.
It doesn't
his 8
age
years.
well for them, right? On their side.
Well, but you'd have to have standards before it would matter.
It doesn't matter when you play it back, yeah.
I mean, if you have standards, then it matters.
They say they evolve. No. Which one's the real one?
Right. So keep in mind, just a few weeks ago, Trump was going to tank the economy with tariffs. He was going to make inflation spiral out of control. He wasn't going to, because he didn't take the border bill, or the Republicans didn't pass the border bill that supposedly Dementia Joe put before Congress.
Yeah.
Happened kind of late 2024, just before Trump came in, and that was shut down. That the border could never be fixed. And then magically, we've had days where there's been as few as 8 people caught crossing the southern border.
Whoa. Guys.
Okay.
It's huge.
Right. Well, if we looked at the 4 years of Joe Biden, somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million people came in a year. Or you could break that down to roughly 8,000 a day. A day. That came across illegally because he invited them to do it. And Trump, with just a little bit of will, a little bit of focus, and some manpower, got it down from 8,000 to 8. Huh.
Couldn't be done.
So, my point with all that is they were complaining about all these things, and clearly they had to let those go. Well, okay, well, he fixed those magically fast. So we need to change the subject. So what's the new thing? The new thing is defending and protecting criminals. Because, I mean, who could be a more oppressed group? Because in the Olympics of oppression, why, those poor criminals. I mean, it used to be with wokeism that, you'd get points if you were gay. You'd get points if you were transgender, which was better than just being gay. You'd get more points if you had the surgery. You'd get more points yet, depending on your skin color. You'd get extra points, like bonus points, if, say, you grew up in a single family home. But now they've decided all that's out. They have a new top category, and that's the criminal. The ultimate victim, the criminal. And that seems to be who they support. Our senator, our state senator, the more sane of the two. Here in California, we've got Adam Schiff, our national embarrassment. Probably the only politician that I consider to be better at lying than Gavin Newsom. So I guess that's an accomplishment. Well, our better senator is Alex Padilla. And he recently crashed the party. By crash the party, I mean that Kristi Noem, head of Department of Homeland Security, was giving a speech about what's going on in LA. And he demanded that he needed to have a conversation with her during a press conference. So he forced his way in. Apparently he's a big enough guy that he kind of forced his way in. He did identify himself, but he kept rushing towards her. He was trying to make a spectacle. He clearly wanted to be arrested because they got nothing. So they're hoping that the public will see that and go, oh, that poor man. He just wanted to talk to her. As he pushed his way through the crowd, was told by law enforcement to stop, and he still kept doing it. So he was behaving in a way that is very similar to a criminal. So wouldn't that make him completely right? If the criminal's the most important thing in the Democrats' world, I'm going to give you another example of how the criminals have become, well, the most important thing. The most oppressed in our society. We have had an MS-13 gang member out of, I think it was Maryland, and he got deported. Now, he had a deportation order that he'd overstayed. He had already been before a judge at least twice, and they determined that he was at least MS-13 affiliated. He had beaten his wife, and she had filed a complaint about it. And then they picked him up and they sent him to El Salvador. You know where MS-13's from. That's where he was from. So they sent him back to his home country. And we had Democratic senators just absolutely pitching a fit, running down to rescue the poor Maryland father. You know, the MS-13 criminal that had tattoos that represented the letters MS-13. It was like a skull, but it's very much a gang thing. And if you do any research, you go, oh yeah, that fits. And that's where the priority is. So rather than a society where we have people that are accountable and the good law-abiding citizens are the most important thing, I believe that the Democrats have decided that the criminals, I'm waiting for a bill to come before Congress about criminal rights. I think they should get welfare so that they will not have to be criminals. Doesn't that seem... And counseling. And maybe a crying room. Seems right. Just seems right. We're going to go ahead and go to our next clip.
Let me be clear. There will be no tolerance for violence. That's why today, along with the CHP and Office of Emergency Services, I've activated the California National Guard to support the CHP to enhance security with an initial deployment of up to 1,000 Guard members to protect critical state infrastructure in and around the state capitol. Also today, we're standing up temporary security perimeter around the capitol. We'll, of course, share additional information and additional measures that we're taking in the coming days. But let me be clear. What we witnessed in our nation's capital was an undemocratic and unconscionable assault on our republic and the freedoms upon which our nation was founded. California will take every necessary measure to protect public safety and our democratic principles and to ensure that those disgraceful actions are not repeated here.
So this is not Gavin talking about the current situation. This is Gavin talking about protecting the Capitol, and not the federal Capitol in D.C., but the cesspool of Sacramento, from peaceful COVID protesters. Now, if we looked at the First Amendment, it's pretty clear. You should be mad that you couldn't go to church, yet Gavin made sure that strip clubs were open, that you could go get your liquor, that you could go to a pot shop, but you couldn't go to church. First Amendment guarantees religious rights, or first aspect of First Amendment. State of California, as well as the Biden administration, were colluding on free speech, and they actively tried to censor you. We go all the way over to people wanted to peacefully protest. That's the right to assemble. And you just heard what Gavin was just making sure. He needed how many cops? Did you hear how many he called for? 1,000? To shut down a peaceful protest. Nobody was throwing rocks. Nothing was happening. But again, words don't mean things as long as you redefine them to wherever it's convenient for you. So hypocrisy wouldn't count. And frankly, by today's standards, if those people that had protested the COVID protocols, if they'd started stealing, looting, robbing, throwing rocks at officers, why shouldn't they have deserved a medal? Because that's almost like the standard. It's like, if you talk about what's happening in LA, they're nothing but just peaceful people. So it's crazy to me that these are all organized. It's crazy to me that 59% of the people are now okay with this. Actually, that's not crazy. It's crazy that 40% shift towards the Republicans, or more specifically Trump, because let's face it, Trump outperforms the Republican brand because they trust him more, because at least he's real. You don't always like what he has to say, but you get it straight. You get what he feels. And if you understand, he loves to troll. Like, he keeps talking about his third term. You know, and then, of course, the Democrats take him completely seriously, and they pitch a fit. Well, for me, it's just entertainment, because when you see him in his serious moments, he knows he can't run for a third term. We're going to go ahead and play our last clip. This is a local guy to me. Don't know him real well. I'm definitely a fan. Dvory Darkin. You should check him out. He is a former veteran, so I always want to say thank you to veterans for serving. He was in the Army. He's got a young kid. He's a transplant from LA. And he's adopted. Really sharp guy. And I just kind of wanted to hear have my audience hear a little bit of what he had to say. And I hope that while you like, subscribe, share, and help me out, hit the bell notifications, here's also somebody worth checking out. Dvory's kind of big time, and I hope at some point I can actually call him a friend instead. At this point, we're just allies, and I'm a fan. Let's go ahead and play that clip. Ah! What's happening with our sound? Well, I don't know what's going to happen with that one. We'll have to play with that. Anyway, check out Dvory Darkin. Good guy. Look, California's on a precipice. When COVID started, I really felt like we were on a precipice and we were about to fall into a pit. Or slide further down into a pit, because let's face it, we got real problems here in California. We got the fourth largest economy, and yet we also have the biggest gap between the rich and the poor. You know, in socialist California, they have largely socialist policies. That's crazy. We've got the highest unemployment rate. Again, fourth or fifth largest economy in the world, if our state was a country. So we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. We got the most homeless. Spending problem, not a revenue problem. We got the most, by far, and I would venture to say most by percentage, number of illegal aliens that are all lining up. I shouldn't say all, because some of them, many of them legitimately do work that I wouldn't want to do. I've worked in the field. It's not fun. Nonetheless, we've got more of them getting Medicaid. That's why Medicaid is broke. So again, spending problem, not a revenue problem. So I'm talking about California being on the precipice. And when we started COVID, I didn't have a lot of hope because we weren't organized. We had been in the minority, did not have a statewide we haven't had anybody elected statewide that had anything but a D by their name, meaning Democrat, since Arnold Schwarzenegger. How long ago was that? Getting close to 20 years? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel old.
So I thought we were going to slide into the pit. And then more grassroots kept rising up. Trump taught us a model on how to fight back because, let's face it, the Republicans largely just, every time a Democrat would go, "You're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe," they'd run. Rather than articulate their ideas and face it, they'd run. "Oh, well, you said I'm one of these evil names, so I need to run." And Trump showed us that, no, we didn't have to run. We could stand up for ourselves. We could be bold and strong and fight for our values. We could talk about our vision. And so that began to shift culture. Heck, in a whole lot of California, to this day, though it's gotten better, the idea that you had a patriotic shirt. If I wear one in the Bay Area, I don't usually wear one that says Trump, but anything even patriotic with a flag on it.
Yeah.
I've had people
Why not? Then?
come up and get in my face and give me grief while I'm out in my other job. I do this for fun. Doesn't matter what my other job is. That's crazy. And some of that's still today, but as I look around, it's begun to shift. More people are like, well, okay, America's not perfect. Yes, America has some blood on its hands. Every country does. We have more freedom, prosperity, liberty, opportunity. We're the beacon of light for the world. And people are starting to realize that. More people are starting to realize, hey, wait a minute. The government was willing to oppress me. But if I knew my rights and I realized if our rights are granted from God, our rights are based upon the individual, then if we were to look at this in a power structure, which is more powerful? The individual or your local government? Which one's more powerful? Now, a lot of people are like, well, come on. It's obviously your local government. What if instead of one individual, it was 100? And they were ready with their pitchforks? I think things shift. Not that I'm advocating for violence. I just chose pitchforks because it's kind of a traditional, we're going to go get the politicians. Seems like really terrible to waste a perfectly good pitchfork on a politician. So now all of a sudden, I'm seeing people be patriotic and be vocal about it. Well, that's a big deal. That's a culture shift. Now we're more organized. Now we're fighting back. Now when they propose ridiculous legislation, and keep in mind we have a supermajority in both houses, meaning the Democrats can get through anything they want without a single Republican vote. And then we got Lord Newsom, who will, aside from now that he's finding he needs to disagree with Governor Newsom because he wants to run for president, and some of the positions that he outlined before won't play well on a national stage, Newsom is regularly disagreeing with Newsom. For instance, on Newsom's podcast, and again, I'm just a little guy. Newsom's got a governor of 40 million people. And his podcast, it gets less than 10,000 views. Even the one with Charlie Kirk, most people watched it on clips from Charlie Kirk because they didn't want to give Newsom a view. Well, Newsom largely brings on people like Charlie Kirk. They disagree with him. They clean his clock. He lies his way through it. But it's just pitiful that 10,000 views. I get 2. And I'm nobody. I'm just a guy that passionately believes in the Constitution and is thrilled that I live in a republic. And since I have all these rights and these liberties, the responsibility is to defend those liberties. The individual is what makes all the difference. If we looked at the start of the Constitution, it starts with we the people. In order to form a more perfect union. But it's we the people. So if I was to say something like, the freedom of the free world depends on you. You'd be like, come on. What do you mean it depends on you? That's too much responsibility. I can't handle that. Would it be fair to say that the freedom of the free world depends on the Constitution? Maybe. How about the freedom of the free world depends on the United States? Can we agree on that one? I think we can agree on that one. The freedom of the free world depends upon the United States, even with its flaws. Okay, if we agree on that part, then what does the freedom of the U.S. depend upon? The Constitution, right? There's our document that enshrines our liberties. And what's the basis of the Constitution? The individual. So, in effect, the freedom of the free world does depend on you. Some other things that are happening that I'm excited about in California. There is a ballot initiative, and we have a ballot initiative process that has been put in California to kind of go around the legislature. Now, I don't really love the idea that we have something that goes around the legislature. Nonetheless, because we have an insane legislature, it provides opportunities. This ballot initiative is about voter ID. It deals with two aspects of voter ID. When you first register to vote, you need to prove that you're actually a U.S. citizen. And I think along with that, I think the other part of that is you have to be a California resident U.S. citizen, because, we wouldn't want anybody voting in our election if they weren't both of those things. Not that they would ever happen.
No, never.
Never. And then the other aspect is when you show up to vote in person. Now, in California, this is not as big a deal as it sounds because we have universal mail-in balloting. But it's still a big deal. So if you show up in person, now, if I was to look and go to my Register of Voters or Shirley Weber's website, I could see who'd already voted, who regularly votes. It takes some digging and some work. And if I realize that, wow, this person hasn't voted in the last 3 elections, and all I need to do is show up and know their address and have a signature that is remotely similar. Remotely. Meaning, like, if I wrote one with my right hand and I wrote one with my left hand, they'd look remotely similar, and that would pass. Well, okay, so this eliminates one type of cheating. But it's a big deal because it's a huge first step, because what the Democrats who rule California have wanted is universal mail-in balloting and ballot harvesting. Well, we need to stop that because it's just too vulnerable a system. Jimmy Carter had a commission after he was president that he led about the vulnerabilities in our voting system. And he said the biggest thing that was a threat to fair and honest elections was universal mail-in balloting, and that happened during Lord Gavin's rule. Gavin's got to go. The other thing that is a huge moment of hope is there are now 8 million signatures to put Gavin on a recall for the second time, because Gavin's got to go. Folks, get out there, spend some time learning the Constitution, learn about your rights, but more importantly, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and exercise and talk about what you believe in, even if it doesn't agree with me. We've got this amazing freedom. Don't sit there in silence, but use your First Amendment right peacefully and go try to make a difference in this world. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town.